Welcome to the Progtalks by the Progspace. Welcome to the Progtalks, an interview series by the Progspace where we will be talking to musicians in all corners of the progressive music scene.
Welcome back to another episode of the Progtalks. I'm your guest host, Dario, and this is my second episode for the Progtalks. Thank you again to Rune, Van, and Matt for having me. And today I have calling from the UK, Rich Gray from Aeon Zen. Hi, Rich. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm super excited to talk to you about the new Aeon Zen album, which is called Transversal. It's going to be out on September 24th on Layered Reality Productions, and it is a very, very special one. So I want to know everything about it, and I think talking about Transversal is not we can't talk about Transversal if we don't talk about the history of Aeon Zen as a band. So I was just re-listening to the whole discography, and maybe we could also now work our way towards Transversal throughout the history of Aeon Zen, if you were up for that.
We can give it a go. I'll see what I remember. So a little while, but
maybe start at the beginning. Your first output with Aeon Zen was in 2009, Mine's Portrait, if I'm informed correctly.
You are correct, yes.
As far as I know, you're the mastermind and founder of the band. So how did this project come about in the first place back then?
Yeah, so it came about originally because I'd been in a few bands that sort of either fizzle out or have member problems and things just kind of like first bands do, you know, they rarely actually go anywhere. So I decided after a while, I'd been in like bands at school, and then I joined a band called Timefall, where I met a couple of really great musicians who have featured on Aeon Zen stuff since. But again, that sort of had problems in just picking up steam and keeping momentum going. Like we had an album out and that sort of thing, but it just kind of fizzled out. So at that point, I'm thinking like, well, I've been in like a number of bands where I've been trying to get things going and have collaborative bands and everything, but it's just not working. So I can play most of these instruments, like aside from the drums, which I haven't done on albums, and like the high power metal vocals I don't tend to do. But other than that, like I can do everything. I can write the songs. I can even write the lyrics and record almost all the instruments myself. So that's basically what I did. And that's what turned into A Mind's Portrait, was like the first, well, some of the like first 10 proper like prog songs I'd written were basically that album.
Wow, and you managed also to get a whole host of singers for that album. And
like on that album, we've got like Nils from Pagan's Mind. Who else was on that one? Of course, Andi was on that album, Andi Kravljaca, who has been with us ever since. So he's actually the only guy other than me that's been on every single Aeon Zen album, which is quite cool. But yeah, like I got in touch with a load of singers that I liked, because I thought like I can do like either death metal kind of vocals or more sort of lower mid-range kind of stuff. But the sort of power progressive metal kind of stuff isn't really my forte. So I thought I'll get in touch with a load of singers that I really like. And at the same time, that'll sort of give me a bit of a boost in terms of like getting it out to people, because they're going to say, oh, I really like that singer. What's this band? You know? And that's just kind of how it happened. I just wrote to singers that I really liked, and luckily they were keen to be a part of it.
Yeah, I was listening to it the other day, and the second track, Time Divine, where Niels sings, I was like, well, okay, this is the most Pagan's Mind song I have heard outside of Pagan's Mind. I also had this like cosmic weird thing going on mood-wise or atmosphere-wise. Do you have a favorite track from Mine's Portrait?
I have to remember what's on there. I quite like maybe Blinded Rain. I think might be one of my favorites because it goes from the sort of laid back stuff. It gets a bit heavier. Then it's got this big, like spacey, cool midsection that's kind of a bit more modern prog, kind of in a way. Like it's got that sort of atmospheric, spacey, more like bigger kind of feel to it than either like a traditional sort of power metal progressive kind of stuff or like more retro kind of like Genesis kind of stuff. So I think that kind of has a good blend of everything.
Yeah, you just mentioned the power metal influences and also the modern prog influences. Overall, when you started out writing stuff for Aeon Zen back then, what were your main influences? Like, did you just pick your favorite sounds and see what will come out
just
there?
Just throw it all together.
Because I think, like from an outside perspective, it's pretty for the prog metal, for someone who knows the prog metal scene and the most popular directions the big prog bands are going. That at the core, I would say Aeon Zen was mostly more leaning towards a more like traditional melodic sound, but you always had your modern influences and some more modern guitar sounds or riffs.
Yeah, because I think like especially the first couple of albums have more of a kind of retro prog sound to them than the later ones, which get more into the metal territories. And it's kind of interesting that it came about that way, because I was going to say, like, when I was first getting into even metal, like it was all about like bands like Death and like heavy like death metal bands were the stuff I got into first before I then like found like Dream Theater, Symphony X, and then I went back further to like Yes and Genesis and the like prog rock band. Like I did it all backwards. So then, so I think by the time I wrote A Mind's Portrait, I was more focused maybe on sort of slightly older sounds. But then, of course, having played like metal stuff for so long, that obviously was a big influence still. But I think at that time, like I've been listening to a lot of Frost, which is more of a sort of prog rock kind of thing. And then the obvious ones like Dream Theater, Symphony X, and stuff like Spock's Beard too.
Cool.
Which I think it kind of shows on the first album because it's got more of that rock influence.
Yeah, it could be. I wrote two more bands down that are a little bit smaller that popped into my mind listening to A Mind's Portrait. That would be Sun Caged and Andromeda.
Definitely Andromeda, I think. Like some of the wackier sections maybe have a bit of Andromeda to them, yeah.
And Sun Caged is more the melodic stuff, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Moving on to your second album, The Face of the Unknown, 2010. And you just mentioned Frost, and I see Jim Godfrey was on there. And also Michael Erickson. And what do you remember from that album?
Well, it was pretty soon after the first album. A lot of these songs were kind of written around the same time. But I think it has a slightly more modern feel. Like there's more metal sections on this one than the first one. It was just sort of, I just really wanted to keep momentum going with this album and not be one of those bands that sort of starts out, puts an album out, then 5 years later you get another one, And I'm trying to remember how it went down really. Again, like vocally I reached out to more singers that I really liked, like you said, Jem from Frost, and there was Nick from Spock's Beard, Michael from Circus Maximus, and Johnny Tatum from Ephemera, who I was in Timefall with. So that's where he came from. That's the connection with him, was he was in like my first like real band that put out an album.
Whatever happened to Ephemera? I mean, they put the
I hear they're still working on a second album, but I'm I don't know. I don't have any insight.
It's gonna be like this, like the follow-up to a Skeptic's Universe from Spiral Architect.
Well, I'm sure when they do put it out, it'll be amazing. But they'll get there.
Yeah. Any favorite songs that you remember from The Face of the Unknown from 2010?
I remember Natural Selection came about really quickly. Because it was like that one riff in 5/4. Yeah? Yeah, because it was like, it was basically that one riff that goes through most of the song. And then there's the sort of bridge section that changes key like 3 or 4 times. But I like that one because it's a bit of a curveball, especially with Jem's vocals on there, because it's not like your typical metal kind of stuff. Like his voice it's a bit more like mine in terms of range. But I think it has such a cool quality. And I had this thing that was like I think originally the working title for it was like Porcupine Tree or something, because it has that kind of like the guitar effects on it, like just reminding me of like Fear of a Blank Planet? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's where the idea for that one came from. But then stuff like Visions I liked a lot as well, which is a sort of like that was actually inspired from Andi's vocals being on the first album, because he used to be in Seventh Wonder, and then listening to Seventh Wonder, it's kind of got those like bass guitar unison runs and that sort of thing, and that's what kind of got that song going. But yeah, I mean, there's too many songs I like, which I suppose is a good thing for your own music. if you still enjoy them like 11, 12 years later, it can't be too bad.
But you just mentioned the bass guitar, and you kind of course, live, you always been playing bass for Aeon Zen, and that's also why you're kind of mostly regarded as a bass player, as your main instrument, maybe also because you also joined Annihilator with that instrument. So I think but it's kind of unusual that you'll have the bass player as the mastermind of the whole band. But you also mentioned that you're a multi-instrumentalist, and except for the drums, you can play all the instruments in the studio.
So like on almost all the albums I recorded the guitars, the bass, the keyboards, whatever other little touches, and like backing vocals and even lead vocals on some tracks I did. But I think like in terms of the bass, I've always just kind of steered towards the bass a bit more than guitar. Just in terms of like what I enjoy playing. Like if I'm going to play live, like I want to play an instrument that I really enjoy playing. Plus, like, well, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's easier, but I just find it just kind of works for me a bit better, and I can kind of like get in the groove a bit more and feel the music more playing bass live. It's just more fun to me, I think.
Bass is a groove instrument. Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but also like trying to write things on bass that people don't usually. So it's not just like following a guitar riff all the time. Like I find that more interesting in that I can kind of experiment and explore more on the bass than maybe on the guitar, especially in metal, because it's all about big riffs and that kind of thing. And if you can find a way to work the bass into that where it's not just copying the guitar, then that's kind of fun, I think.
Moving on to Enigma in 2012. That was
13, wasn't it?
September 10th, 2012, according to Metal Archives.
It was delayed until January the something 2013.
All right, so so Metal Archives is wrong.
Here
it says January 22nd on Nightmare Records.
That's the one, yeah.
But it is
because originally the reason for that was that I was going to self-release it again, like I did with the previous. Well, it was with my own record label, which I did for the first 2 albums, and then I was going to do that for Enigma, and then I decided, like fairly last minute, to actually work with Nightmare Records, because they put forward a really cool deal, and Lance is a really cool guy that runs it as well. And it just kind of all fell into place. So we decided just delay it a few months, get everything in place, and then we'll put it out beginning of the year after.
I'm surprised that Lance is not singing on one of the songs, but it was actually the first.
It was already
album, done. the first album with Yeah, well, it says here it's kind of Andi was more permanent member back then already.
Yeah, because it was in 2011. Well, sort of mid 2010 when we started playing live, but 2011 was when it sort of picked up, and we did things like we toured with Devin Townsend and that sort of thing, and it became more of like a unit of people. So then by that point, Andi was basically like the lead singer. But I had this big concept album where I wanted multiple vocalists still, because it just worked with the way the album was structured and how it all flowed together. So it's kind of like the way I see it is like Andi is like the lead vocalist on that album, and then there's the guest vocalists around him in a way. Even though they kind of split the same amount of time, that's just kind of how it is in my mind, at least.
All right. My favorite song that I put down would be Artificial Soul. So that's kind of the first one after the intro.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one because it kind of has this huge build towards the end where it's got those really like almost kind of genty kind of riffs at the end. I'm trying to think because the way I wrote it was basically in like one long Cubase project. And I just kind of wrote from beginning to end as one thing. So when it comes in terms of like picking a song, I kind of see it as one song, but I have to actually look at the track list. Hang on.
We're going to talk about something that's similar in a second, I guess, when we're talking about the album.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I think, because I just had a quick peek. I think my favorite might be Warning on there.
All right.
Because it's got that kind of, I don't know, I really like the swing to it and the kind of long, drawn out intro that's kind of chilled out and then it just explodes. And I love that moment where it all kicks in. Like that was one of my favorite things I maybe ever written, I think.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
With all those layers coming in. Because I remember like the main like melody line, that thing. I remember I actually like sampled my voice of every single one and like put loads of effects on it and then doubled it with guitar and keyboards. And it was just like so many layers that it was a lot of fun.
Great. Before we come to the new album, there's still a couple of things that came out after Enigma. There was a little self-portrait EP.
Yeah, like a reworking of a few tracks from the first album.
Yeah, and then there's still two full-length albums coming. The first one would be Ephemera. In 2014, respectively, 2018, when you put out the extended version with the narration or the audio book or whatever you want to call it. I
think we called it an audiobook. Because originally that was like, I think it was a pre-order incentive. Because I'd written all the lyrics to the album. It's another concept album similar to Enigma was. And it actually follows that story on and basically finishes that. But I basically gave Andi the lyrics. And then once he'd finished recording all the vocals, he actually wrote like a story around the lyrical story and basically made an audiobook based on the lyrics of the album.
Yeah.
So then that was like a pre-order incentive. Then when it came to putting it out, re-putting it out in 2018, I was kind of thinking like, it's a shame that there's going to be lots of people who will never hear this because you can't pre-order it again. after the Yeah, exactly. So I actually spoke with Andi and he was like, well, if you want to put it together, what would be a cool thing to do is like, I kind of planned it so certain things in the audiobook happen in between certain tracks. It's not like a completely standalone thing. It's kind of like supplementing the story. So it's like if you put the first one after this track, the second one would come after this one, that sort of thing. And it kind of made it into like even more of a concept album.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, I'm kind of torn when I'm listening to an album. I'm not sure like if I like that because, I usually listen to it for the music. But it's like, you can just skip through the narrative if you want, it's all good.
There was like one particular instance lately where I really enjoyed specific narration parts and that was the last two albums from the Greek band Need. And both had like really, really cool. Well, like both albums had one song or one track respectively where there was a narration or a dialogue spoken by actors. And it of course it divided the fans. Some said they always skip it because they're distracted by it or something.
But the good thing about that is that they made it its own track, so you can skip it if you want to.
Yeah.
Like the part that kind of annoys me is when there's like a song that I really like, but there's like 2 minutes of intro talking, like story before you actually get into the song. It's like, just make it separate and we can just...
that would be the case with the last Aeon, right?
Yeah. Which is still a good album, but you know, like convenience, especially these days. Like people's attention span. I'm always like, how can I get this song in quicker? Well, I'll just cut the first bit and make it into a separate track.
Favorite song on Ephemera?
I like The Entity. That might be, or maybe Life, because it's so wacky.
Life was my choice.
Yeah.
And I put down Sweet Little Bass Solo.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those were fun. Yeah, because it's got that whole like kind of Queen sort of thing at the beginning with all the like jazzy kind of stuff going on. But yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
But I was also going to say, like, The Entity was actually the first thing I wrote on an 8-string guitar. So that was kind of
that intro riff is quite heavy and
that was quite a fun one. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like as you get further on, like the albums kind of get heavier, which I don't know. It's just something that happened. Like it wasn't really planned. It was just kind of what I was writing at the time, and it just kind of progressed that way, I guess.
Yeah. So somehow I have the feeling that but there's several bands who started out really heavy progressed in a way where they went into a more melodic direction.
Yeah, like Opeth or something like that. Yeah.
Catatonia and Anathema as well. And or Leprous more recently.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Anyway,
we kind of gone the other way.
Yeah, that's prog.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
You're not doing what the others are doing.
Yeah, you just do whatever you want.
If you are enjoying this interview, please head over to theprogspace.com for more reviews, articles, pictures and interviews all about progressive music. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. theprogspace.com.
We're on the home stretch here. One full-length album to go before we reach the new record that we also want to talk about still, of course.
Before we reach today.
Mm-hmm. So we're at Inveritas from 2019. That's actually, it feels like it was yesterday because after
2020 doesn't count, basically. Yeah, that's why.
Nothing happened there.
Yeah. Well, Inveritas was basically the first Aeon Zen album that was written collaboratively between all the band members. Because in between Ephemera and Inveritas, we actually became a band, basically, and everyone was writing, everyone was basically sharing everything. So that's what happened there. And again, because it was kind of like I'd already decided I didn't want to do another concept album like the previous two. Because you sort of got the first two albums, which were more standalone songs, then the next two, which were these long, drawn-out concept albums. Mm-hmm. So I thought I just kind of want to get back to something that's more standalone, and it doesn't maybe require as much investment in a story or listening from start to finish, even though, there are some long songs on there, which obviously have that kind of feeling, but it's more of like more separated kind of stuff, which also worked out well with people like contributing stuff, because it's like, well, I've got an idea for a song. It's not like one guy writing all the music and it's a big concept. So that kind of worked well in that, like, Alistair would come in, Alistair Bell, who joined on lead guitars and rhythm guitars on this one, but he's kind of amazing at lead. So I think of him as a lead guitarist. So like he'd come in with a riff and then we'd develop it and that would turn into one song. And then maybe like Andi had a vocal idea for something and we'd base a song off that. And it just kind of worked really well.
Yeah. My favorite song would be The Bouncy Treachery of Images.
Okay. The instrumental one. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I remember how to play a single riff from that song. Because that's quite a crazy one, but it's definitely fun to listen to. I think my favorite might be The Last Alive, because it's got like the whole middle section I really enjoyed, because it's actually based on a riff that Steve, our drummer, had written. I think he'd written it for a music course he was doing where they just wanted, like he basically had to compose a song, and he said like, could you help me flesh this out into something that's more than just like 4 bars long? And then I sent it back to him and it was like 4 minutes and it basically slotted straight into this song. So I don't think he was expecting that.
Nice. So yeah, what does all this history have to do with the new album, Transversal? Tell us.
So the new album was written before any of these songs that we've just talked about. So it was written back in 2006, 2007. The whole, but like almost entirety of the music for this album was written before Aeon Zen was even a band. So that's kind of how it ties in with the history. And also, I think you can hear that when you listen to it. You hear more of those sort of older influences, and it kind of sounds more like something that maybe I would have written like 10 years ago or something. But it kind of has the modern influences in there as well, especially in like the guitar tones and how everything's produced. Like it sounds more modern than the first few albums we did.
So how did it happen that how did you come to say, okay, now I want to use these snippets of whatever that I composed back then?
Well, it was kind of like yeah. Well, we were thinking like the way the band had been going, like it had been a really long gap between Ephemera and Inveritas. It was like 5 years, I think. And it kind of just felt like everyone was kind of maybe moving on a little bit and wanted to do their own thing. And then especially after like I joined Annihilator as well, that took up a lot of my time. And then producing, mixing, working with other bands as well takes up a lot of my time. So then it was kind of getting challenging to fit Aeon Zen in with all of that. And I think maybe I'd also kind of evolved to a point where maybe I didn't need it as much. And I kind of wanted to explore other things and maybe do an album in a different style and this kind of thing. So there was kind of talk about, well, should we maybe try and wind things down and call an end to Aeon Zen? So then we were thinking, well, how are we actually going to do that? Because I've always thought like, I don't like it when bands that I like just kind of fizzle out. And then one day there's maybe an announcement on Facebook that's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're not doing anything now. Bye-bye.
Bye
yeah.
now.
So then I was thinking like, yeah, exactly. Like, what can we do where it's not going to be like that? So I thought, well, hang on, I have this like huge epic 30+ minute song. So why don't we re-record that? And then it like kind of brings everything full circle. It makes like a nice closure for the band. And it's a way of like going out with a bang rather than just kind of fading away.
Wow. Yeah, that's sad but cool in a way, as I think it's especially because I was listening to it a couple of times now in the last week or so, and as a whole 30-minute song, it's and I think it really is my favorite Aeon Zen material to date overall.
That's good to hear.
I really enjoy especially the parts 3 and 4, Chase the Sunrise and 10,000 Eyes. That would be my favorite part. So it's
well,
kind
the way it was written, it was all written basically from start to finish as one long song. And then later I was thinking like, well, we could put it as one track, but as well as it kind of looking more like an EP if you do that rather than an album. But I was also thinking, like, if there's a part that someone really does like, it's kind of like putting chapters in a book. Like, it really annoys me when I'm reading a book and there's no chapters. So it's just kind of a way of like giving people like markers along the way to sort of pinpoint certain parts throughout the album.
Yeah. So how was the process of the recording process for this album? As you said, this one it was your composition again. It was not a collaborative effort like the previous one. And also, I think Andi is living in Sweden, right? So did you actually meet? Did he come to your studio to record the vocals? Did you do them at his place or in Sweden somewhere?
Well, we recorded it basically throughout 2020 and then the beginning of 2021. So we couldn't really travel anyway. But yeah, no, well, what happened was basically, when I wrote it back in like 2007, it was completely instrumental. And I'd like left parts where it's like, well, I can put a verse here and this will be a chorus. And like I had it laid out in my mind what was going to happen when, but I had no lyrics and no melodies.
Okay.
And then, of course, coming back like 13 years later to a thing that I know pretty much inside out because I've sort of heard it on and off. Like maybe I'd revisit it every year or two and have a listen and think like, oh, actually, that'd be really cool to use at some point. But then after hearing it for so long instrumentally, it's really tough to then suddenly try and put melodies over something and write lyrics.
Yeah.
So I basically sent it to Andi's way with like 5 pages of notes of the structure. Like I was thinking this could be a verse and then there's going to be a solo here, but I haven't done it yet. And then this is going to be a chorus. And basically he spent like the next maybe month or two writing lyrics and coming up with melodies and recording all the vocals as he went along. So that's how all the lyrics and vocals came about. And then, I basically worked kind of backwards. Like I got my original recording that I did way back when, and sort of gradually replaced all the instruments, or most of them. There are actually a few parts on there that are from the original recording, which is quite cool because I just wanted to have some original bits on there. Yeah. So I just sort of worked my way through re-recording everything, adding some parts. Like I think it was like 3 minutes shorter originally, and I added some more verses, solo sections. Like in Twilight Part 1, it originally just had like the whole intro and then a chorus, and then it went to the like acoustic outro. But then I thought, well, it would be cool if it actually had like more of an overture with themes and riffs that appear later. So I basically added that afterwards using what I had like coming later on. So there was some sort of like reworking of it as well as just re-recording, because I think you can kind of hear that in how it sounds, is that there's more like modern sounds to it rather than just sort of sounding like the first 2 albums, because I don't think it does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You just mentioned Twilight Part 1, which is already out as a single and on YouTube with a video. And with that video release, you were teasing kind of something bigger in that department as well.
So we've actually been putting together a video for the entire album, and it's going to go up. I can't remember exactly when, but around the release date, we're going to put up the entire music video for the entire album. So that's going to be quite a cool thing. That's definitely something on a scale that we haven't done before. Because we were kind of thinking like, what can we do to make it extra special, aside from just being this like historic piece that has a lot of meaning to me. And I think when you listen to it, you can hear that and it kind of resonates maybe a bit more than some of the other albums do. But then in terms of actually like putting it out, what can we do to make it stand apart and really be like a big farewell in a way?
Yeah, I think that's going out with a bang.
Exactly. Yeah,
I think this episode is going to drop a week before. So it
might actually come out around the time of this, if I remember correctly.
Just check,
don't quote me on it, but it might.
Check the socials, and that's definitely something extra to look forward to. In the progressive world, it's not unheard of course, to make an album that's just one song.
Yeah.
So, did you have any idols or any kind of albums or songs, or in this case, it's the same that you particularly liked and looked up to, in this specific thing?
I think probably when I started writing it originally, it was albums like The Odyssey, Symphony X, obviously. And like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence was a big one as well. I'm trying to think, what was I listening to at that time? But yeah, I mean,
I think both absolutely make sense. Of course,
and also like not necessarily like full album concepts, but like I think it was the first chapter, the Circus Maximus album. Like the title track off that was 25 minutes long. Like that was a big one as well at that time for me.
Yeah, right. I just wrote down my my favorite full album concept songs, and one of the biggest, of course, would be Fate's Warnings, A Pleasant Shade of Grey. That was a little bit earlier in history, and also Green Carnation's Light of Day, Day of Darkness.
Which are actually both albums I kind of discovered after I'd written this. But yeah.
But there's a third one, I think not many really picked up when it came out. And it was also kind of, I think it became the swan song of this particular band from the United States. The album's called Suspended at Aphelion, from While Heaven Wept. And it's also like a 40-minute song, and I don't actually know that one. I'll have to check it out. That would be my recommendation for the day.
Okay.
Check out While Heaven Wept, Suspended at Aphelion. Absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
The intro is like, a string quartet, and that already gives me goosebumps on that.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go back and listen to it now. So wrapping up the Aeon Zen chapter in your life, looking back at the history of Aeon Zen and the career that you've made, are there any particular highlights that you're fond of looking back to?
It's hard to say, because it's sort of a moving thing. Like looking back, I'd say like every album is a highlight. It's just a different snapshot in time, and you achieve different things with each album. But probably also touring with Devin was a really, really big thing for us, because at that time that was like I think it was the first like proper tour that I'd ever done as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 2011. And then I'd probably say like that tour, and then maybe Enigma as well, putting that out, because that album I'd actually finished in end of 2010, around when The Face of the Unknown came out. I'd finished Enigma, and then there was a lot of like personal stuff behind the scenes where I just wasn't able to put it out for like almost 3 years, basically. Yeah. So I'd say like actually getting that one out, and then also because I think a lot of people think of that as our best album so far without hearing the new one yet. But like I think like that one kind of set the standard for me in a way.
The jury's still out for that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, we should have known each other before, because we should have met at Prog Power Europe 2014. But alas, it was the only year I was not able to make it to Prog Power.
Typical.
Between 2008 and 2019 or something.
Wow.
So unfortunately, I missed my one opportunity. At least I'm gonna have Transversal to spin now. It's a lot of fun listening to this one. It's the 30 minutes, they fly by in an instant. It's really entertaining, and doesn't feel like 30 minutes at all.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
And is there anything that you're already for your like the immediate future where you already know what you're gonna do, what you can share with us? Any plans?
Yeah.
After Aeon Zen.
Well, I'm already working on a solo album actually, which is kind of like the music's all written and quite a bit of it's recorded. So I just want to like push forward with that a little bit more and see how I can put that out. And then aside from that, like producing, working with other bands is something I'm always doing. And then hopefully once things can start opening up more, touring can come back and I'll be playing again with Annihilator.
Actually, I saw Annihilator.
And then maybe we can finally meet somewhere if I'm
absolutely,
because
last time I saw Annihilator, that must have been 2007 maybe. So
okay.
Quite some time before you joined, right? Like 10
that's
years.
Actually the first year that I saw them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I wish you all the best with your new endeavors, and also of course I hope that Aeon Zen fans and also maybe new people who haven't heard about Aeon Zen before will really like Transversal as I do. Thank you, Rich, for being on the Progtalks. Follow Aeon Zen on social media, even though there's not much to come anymore, but there's still the album, and you can still pre-order Transversal through aeonzen.com/store in the UK or the rest of the world. And if you're in the UK, in Europe, you can pre-order it through Layered Realities web store. It's gonna drop next week on September 24th, and of course, you're gonna find all the links in the description. As always, thanks for listening and watching. Please give us a like or subscribe if you like what we are doing here. Next week, your main host, Uncle Prog Rune, will be back with another very interesting interview partner. Until then, stay safe and keep spreading the prog love.
The Progtalks, produced by the Progspace. Main host, Rune Belsvik Reinås. Produced by Rune Belsvik Reinås, Vanessa and Matthias Kirsch. All graphics and animations by Vanessa Kirsch. Intro theme by Giuseppe Negri. Outro theme by Zach Munovitz. This was the Progtalks by the Progspace. See you in a week.